I'd like to introduce you now to a gentleman called Chris Larner, who accompanied his ex-wife to the clinic in Switzerland run by the Dignitas organisation. In many ways, Chris, that is, I've never met you before, that is all I know about you. How did that situation come?
Many years ago, it was one of those marriages where we were better off. We were better friends once we were divorced. But she was diagnosed with MS, and she suffered and fought with that terrible condition very bravely for many years. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And following a bad fall and a relapse in 2005, her health steadily deteriorated. And a few years after that, she asked me if I would accompany her, if it ever came to it, if she ever felt that enough was enough. And she felt that in 2010. And
did you say yes to her back at the original
I
point
did,
of
yeah,
request?
back at the original
without
request.
thinking about it too deeply? Or?
It was a sort of provisional decision at the time. I mean, we talked about it a lot in the years following, but as it got closer and closer, it was with greater trepidation that I did agree to do it with her. But she had made her mind up, and she was a determined and rational woman. She wasn't asking for my permission.
No.
And it was not. I knew. I suppose most importantly, I knew that it was not a decision she had come to lightly.
It's the notion of staying alive becoming unbearable at the heart. That's what it is.
Well, that's exactly, and that was it for Alison. It was the MS which she was suffering from had robbed her, as far as she was concerned, had robbed her of her sense of self. She was no longer the person that she couldn't reconcile her body and her daily pain with who she wanted to be.
Could you? You say as far as she was concerned. I know she wasn't your wife anymore, but did you recognise her self-description, her self-analysis? She
was in an awful lot of discomfort and pain on a daily basis, and I knew that made her very, very miserable. No, inside her head and her heart and her soul was still the same as the woman I'd met.
How did she break it to you that the time had come and that she was going to ask you to keep your promise?
It was following the winter of 2009 was a terrible, terrible cold winter. And winter can be an awful time for MS sufferers, and she had an absolutely miserable winter. And it was following that winter that she just said, I'm not going to go through that again. It was just too scary. She was at the stage of physical emaciation whereby if she got cold at all, it would take her 2 days to warm up. It would take her 3 days to get over the strain of getting cold, and it was just terrible. So, she broke it to me in the spring of 2010, yeah.
And, she needs help to get around, purely and simply. It's the physical challenges of mobility, wheelchairs, aeroplanes. You had the right, I suppose, at that point to back out. You could have said, I'm sorry, I said yes, but now it's push has come to shove. I'm not sure I can go through with this. Did you have any thoughts like that in your own mind?
I could have done. As I say, I was convinced that it, and she and I did talk about this at length. I was convinced that it was a decision she had, very reluctantly come to. She was not one to give up on life.
So there was no danger
easily
of it being poorly thought out or a
no,
response to a single incident. It was
not at all.
Process.
It was a long drawn out.
So what happens when you get off the plane in Switzerland, Chris?
Well, what happens is the world becomes, to a degree, surreal. Alison had not been out of her flat for 18 months, apart from the occasional hospital visit, from which she took days to recover from the stress of it. So she was her world had shrunk to an armchair and a wheelchair and a rota of care workers coming in. So merely to get to Switzerland, to get to the airport, to get on a plane, to get off a plane was an extraordinary kind of road movie. And yeah, that in itself was an extraordinary adventure. And then you find yourself in Switzerland. Now, I speak a smattering of German. I mean, actually, it has to say, as we said, in Switzerland, they speak a dialect of German which is almost entirely incomprehensible to me, certainly. And when we arrived at this hotel, I did have a waitress who would translate for me, not into English, but into standard German.
Comprehensible German.
So I had a chance to
Yes.
understand it. However, Alison didn't speak any German, so here we are in this, for her, very alien country. We make our way with a taxi to a small town on the outskirts of Zurich, about 40 minutes away. We stay in a strange hotel, and that evening we have an interview with the doctor. We have a second interview 3 days later. This is what's required in Swiss law, so that you have a sort of enforced holiday. You have to be there for 3 days.
And a period of contemplation as well for
quite,
both of you,
quite
but
so,
more pertinently for Alison.
Which is important, and that is the reason it's there. But Alison was in no. She was not going to change her mind. She wasn't, and I mean, she was in an awful lot of pain and anguish with her physical discomfort.
Yes.
But there we are. We spent 3 days in a rather swanky hotel in Switzerland, which was a bizarre sort of holiday. It was very odd.
At the end of which
there's a little house around the corner, which is the Dignitas. Don't call it a clinic. They're very clear on that. They say a clinic is somewhere where people are
treated. Yes,
treated and made better, and this isn't.
It's almost the opposite.
Yeah, which was as dignified and as comfortable as such a thing could be. I mean, it was very weird. It was very touching. I mean, listeners who watched the Coronation Street thing last night, there's a surreality there about trying to talk about the future or something. I mean, death in any situation is a painful kind of cessation, obviously, of talking about the future, unless you have faith that we're all going to meet up again. But to try and have those conversations when you know that. There's a date in the diary, there's an hour in the diary, there's a minute in the diary, it's coming up, it's very odd.
I can imagine. Well, I can only imagine. And that sense, when you say surreal, it's almost too epic to contemplate, isn't it? It's the finality of it, the absolutely unique nature of death being the only thing from which you can never return. So you're having a conversation with somebody who's about to undertake the ultimate journey. And yet, for you, it's her comfort that matters. It's her peace of mind. It's her resolve.
As I say, the thing that... I mean, Alison was extremely brave. There's a lot of talk about bravery around this issue. The producers of Coronation Street are brave to do this storyline. There's a lot of chat about bravery. For me, Alison's bravery was that she took the decision herself. She was quite happy to talk about it with people, but as I say, she never asked for the permission of me or of God or of anybody. It was her decision. As far as she was concerned, it was her life, and therefore her decision to do.
And are you still in the room as her life ends?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, it's horrible, really. I mean, it's as you say, the comfort is knowing that this is what this person wants, that it is an end to suffering. But nevertheless, anybody who's sat with anybody who's died either through an assisted suicide or just died, I mean, what can you say? There ain't too much that's good about it.
Evidently.
But in that sense, the Dignitas experience was as peaceful and as I say, as dignified as it could be, I think.
Good. Chris Larner is with me, a gentleman who accompanied his ex-wife to Dignitas in Switzerland after her multiple sclerosis became unbearable, is the only word to describe it, and who presumably, Chris, could have faced criminal prosecutions yourself. I mean, this is different from the Coronation Street storyline in that Alison could not have done what she did without your help. So the concept of assisted dying is more pertinent than perhaps it was on ITV last night.
Well, there's two things there. Firstly, I mean, I saw the Corrie episode last night. I don't know where she got those drugs from. So I
Right.
didn't see that. I know that Alison, before she decided to go to Dignitas, did look online, and there's, as everybody knows, anything online is there. And she did explore ways of trying to take her own life at home, and was simply too scared that something would go wrong and she would end up with her health being even worse than it was. So in a way, she elected for the professionals
Yes.
to step in. I mean, the thing about the storyline in Corrie that I find very disturbing is that it's a kind of, if she's got these drugs from where, what are they, what do they do, what's the medical backup? It's pretty scary. And I know the Samaritans and various people have kind of gone, this is slightly irresponsible as a storyline. I mean, but
some of the criticism has dissipated now that more and more people have actually seen it. It was when it was presented to them as a sort of, here, this is what's coming up. Some of the expert comment I encountered was contingent upon not having seen it. You have seen it. You still have some conniption, some misgivings about it.
Well,
I understand why.
I think it just, any story which is aired like this, I think just lends support to, first of all, the notion that this is something we should be talking about.
Yes.
We're pretty good at silence in this country. I've been told directly that by people who are opposed to law change, for example, that mere discussion of this subject is inappropriate. We should never discuss it. It's just off the agenda. And for me, there are tragic cases out there of people either committing suicide or attempting to commit suicide when they could be helped, and all sorts of things. And unless we can talk about this and address this as an ongoing issue, then it's simply burying stuff under the carpet. And analogous, to my mind, to what was happening before the abortion law was passed in '67, when, as older listeners will remember, there was an awful lot of backstreet abortion and horror stories going on.
Yes.
But your first, what happened when we came back from Switzerland, this was in 2010, was that by then, in theory, yes, I could have been arrested for aiding and abetting suicide, or at least investigated. But already by that time in the country, the DPP and the police were getting increasingly resistant to investigating people such as myself, because I don't represent a threat to anybody else. It was only I was only doing what I did to help Alison. And since then, of course, the Commons have discussed at length, situations whereby it could be said if someone's acting out of compassion, then the DPP should take that into consideration. So already by 2010, it was pretty unlikely that anything was going to happen to me legally. However, the law still being pretty confusing in this country, that doesn't apply for people who are assisting a suicide here, or for indeed doctors who are not allowed to discuss such things with patients.
This is
solicitors and notaries and various people who you might need to get documentation to go to Dignitas are still under threat of investigation, because it can be seen that they're making a professional profit out of it,
And this is precisely what Lord Falconer is talking about. He's proposing the assisted dying bill and has described current legislation as a complete mess, and that's precisely the sort of thing that he is talking about.